everyone, and a massive welcome to a very exciting second episode here on InfoSec Live of Selling Cyber, where the awesome Greg van der Gaast explores how vendors can impress additional value from their offerings in a way that can drive real change to the security landscape by fundamentally changing how their tools and services are positioned and indeed used. Today, we are focusing on understanding your customer and what they need being a crucial part of sales. And in security, that's usually the CISO. But what is a CISO? Before I bring Greg on to answer that question, for those that haven't met me before, my name's Simon Lindstead. I'm the founder of the InfoSec Live community. And by sharing stories and best practice over the last few months, it's led to 45,000 views and 8,000 hours of our content being watched on YouTube by you, our amazing subscribers. So a huge thank you for your engagement. And if you'd like to support the wider InfoSec Live community, or indeed buy me a cheeky decaf coffee, we do have a few ways you can show your appreciation. First up, the ability to purchase super stickers in the YouTube chat if you'd like your question bumped up to the top, and 3 tiers of membership allowing you to show your support in any way that you can. But whether you join or not, being here and engaging with our content is what really matters. So if you're watching this live, please do like and subscribe. We want to make these events as interactive as possible, so make sure you also drop any questions in the chat. And if you're watching on replay, drop those questions in any way. We'd love to hear your feedback, and I'll make sure that we respond back to them. After all, it is you, our audience, who make these events so special. So, Greg, thank you for being patient. Let's get this started and bring you on. Told you I'd ramble on, didn't I?
Yeah, well done.
Thanks.
How are you? I'll give you 9 points for that one.
Thank you. We need cards. So good to have you back on here, and a big hello to everyone in the crowd watching.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning in. So
the last one was interesting because it was basically just off the rails, unscripted, but I think it led us to come up with some ideas of how to proceed in this series from now.
Yes. So let's be honest, still unscripted, but we do have a rough
expecting us that we've scripted something. We haven't, but we at least have a list of ideas. But I think we kind of need to start at the beginning with. Yeah. I'm going to try not to screw up.
You can say I just didn't want to put it in text. Swear away.
Yeah. What the fuck is a CISO? Yeah. No one seems to know. I mean, HR people don't know. Vendors don't know, execs don't know, and I get the feeling like a lot of CISOs don't actually know either. So I think it's kind of an important question. And I did a post last week because I saw another one of these. I think the name of the post was, "Tell me your CISO role isn't a CISO role without telling me it's not a CISO role." And I'll just go through some of the comments because a lot of people point out really good. One was, "You're a C-level reporting into a director of the same area who is in turn also reporting into another director of another area who may or may not be reporting into the exec. And you work alongside a product officer." Chief, but joining the security leadership team rather than the leadership team. Also, paying 90 grand a year for what apparently is the world's largest missile defense company. So that's an interesting one. Wow. And then accountable, someone, Rob C, MBCS, a lot of acronyms. I see Rob a lot, but I don't actually know your full name. He's got 2 quotes that sum it up. Quote, "working alongside," unquote, and the key word there being alongside. And then the next one is, quote, "accountable for." So you're not in charge, but you are accountable for it.
So why is there this confusion? Where does it come from?
But no one seems to know what a CISO is, and it just seems to be like, oh, the most senior security person is there, and you have. And I had this discussion on James Smith. He runs something called the UK CISO Alliances, and there's like a great WhatsApp group with there with a lot of discussions. And someone on there posted like this matrix of like, technical to leadership CISO, and you have these 9 categories of CISOs, and I was like, I just don't agree with that. You've all got different flavors of CISOs, and someone works. I was like, it's a C-level position. It's a strategic leadership position. I mean, you don't see like the CFO doesn't do people's expense reports.
He's not confused about what his role is either, is he?
Yeah, exactly. The COO doesn't pitch in on the help desk to help operations along. They're there to manage how the strategy around how we're going to do our finances or reporting or fiscal benefits, that kind of stuff. How are we going to structure the organization and get the work done? That's what they care about. And I think that's what should be the CISO's role. It is a C-level role. It's supposed to be a C-level role. If it isn't, then what's above it?
Yeah.
We're not like, if we're going to say that it's not a executive level strategic role, why are we putting the C in front of it? And then actually making the role definition something much lower down. I think a lot of those more technical CISO roles, okay, that's head of security operations, but that's not the whole role of a CISO. And
do you see the CISO role sticking around, or do you see it changing?
Changing from what to what?
Well, something with a bit more clarity, or whether the true C-level position, C-level position will incorporate that into it. I mean, I've had that comment from a couple of people. I'm just interested to see what your thoughts are.
I think there's a few maybe like large organizations that do treat it as a true like senior C-level board reporting position. And I think this is where you're like, this is probably not as applicable to every organization, but I think it's where you need to look at to get the gold standard of, this is how it's done in a very large organization. And then obviously you can simplify it and kind of bundle some stuff together as you get smaller. And obviously you're not going to have the support teams. But, major CISO in a major firm, major incident happens, makes 3 phone calls to his or her head of this or that, and they sort the shit out. Yeah. It's not his or her job to get involved with any of that. It's more like, I've set the strategy, I built the program, I built the capabilities, or at least I tasked the people. Probably at that level, you're already tasking different people. I have a head of recovery maybe, or a head of SOC. I then get those heads to manage the problem for me. I built that organization. I'm not getting my hands, I don't want to say dirty, but like I'm managing other stuff up here.
Yeah.
And I think it's a real problem because I don't really see a lot of organizations actually having security programs or strategies. It's just do a bunch of tech.
Yeah.
And there's no real look at, are we doing stuff holistically? And if you look at like a senior, I think the quote I came up with is, my job as a CISO is to, and this goes along a lot with the kind of, most issues come from poor processes, and we're trying to fix them with tech when really we should be addressing the poor processes and the poor culture that leads to poor processes or processes not being followed. And culture is not user awareness, by the way.
No. Or pizza on Friday.
Yeah. No, culture means caring, basically. You see organizations that care put a lot of attention and focus and care into how they do processes to make sure that they are suitable and easy and everyone can live with them, and then everyone understands the reason why, and then everyone cares about executing those processes properly, and then things get done right. Because otherwise, you see every day, you see companies that have procurement processes, they have asset management processes, they have patching processes, and yet they have loads of assets that they can't trace, loads of spend they can't identify, assets that are unmanaged, and a bunch of stuff they know about but isn't being patched for some reason. And that's a question of culture and taking the time and caring enough about the business of getting in there and getting people to talk together, which I think is a big part of the CISO's role, is to enable that communication, to overcome all the miscommunication and misinformation that executives and boards may have heard, thinking, oh, you're the head techie. Like, no, I'm not the head techie. I'm going to employ some people. We're going to employ some people. We're going to manage the techies for us. I'm here to set this strategy and to make sure I have what I need. And you look at people, because the first thing I always do is get a feel for where the organization's at. What are they going to be the biggest challenges, both culturally, processes, what are the technical issues we have, what are the business issues we have, and then getting that management support and buy-in. That's step number one, to create a program which will then address those issues. So it's definitely much more at that level, first of all. And second of all, I think you need to think about, how are most C-level executives compensated? It's okay, good salary, obviously, but most of the compensation package is typically equity.
Yeah.
Your average CEO, CFO, CIO in a lot of cases even, and finance directors, most of their money is stock.
Yeah.
It's the value of their stock. So if I'm not incentivized by my stock, and there's a reason why, and a lot of like regular employees bemoan this, like, oh, the execs get all this stock and we don't. but you also have a lot of organizations where the salaries of the execs are high, but they're not. When you see these really high compensation packages, it's mostly stock. It's not salaries.
Yeah.
The reason is, I want to they're trying to incentivize, and don't get me wrong, a lot of places do this very badly, but they're trying to incentivize good financials around the company. They don't want, if the financial performance of the company is directly linked to your personal compensation, that takes away my incentive to just build myself a massive empire with all 5 of them in the basement, where I'm running a huge bloated IT department or security team. Yeah, but that's, that it doesn't always work that way. And you see companies about to be sold and they fire half the essential staff to make the numbers look better, to pump up the value of the company and sell it, at which point it can no longer survive, but the new owner doesn't know that yet. So it's misused a lot, but the basic financial models are meant to do that. So my goal is, and I think that the quote I used, because I used this a couple of weeks ago and I kind of like it. My job as a CISO is not to do security, it's to shape the organization so that it needs as little security as possible.
Absolutely.
And shaping the business process, shaping the quality of processes, and having them being run so consistently, and having security consideration, security being taken as a consideration in everything we do, which is actually not that hard. Everyone's a security practitioner. I've said this before. Everyone locks their door. People get this. Someone commented, I think today or yesterday, like, maybe we should be using the word safety, not security. Misuse security.
Maybe people would listen more then.
Yeah. And also I think, it's most of the security work out there, so pen testing, SOC analysts, that kind of stuff, it's more firefighting, and we should be moving away from that as much as possible. We've swollen that part of the industry way too much. We're not making, which is why things are just getting out of control, because we're never actually focusing on improving the issues, the processes,
people in the processes. Yeah,
that are leading to all these defects that are creating the attack surface. I've seen loads of companies invest millions into SOC automation, and it's like, you've got thousands of incorrect accounts, or like wrong, that should have been removed. They have the wrong access, they have access to the wrong tools, they have the wrong levels of privilege. Relatively few companies automate that part of it, but they'll spend millions automating the SOC, the consequences of it.
Let me just jump in, because there's been a couple of comments in the chat. Colleen's made a couple. Going back to what you were talking about, whether the CISO sits on the board or not. His first question was, sorry, Colleen, do apologise. Do you think any women?
Well done.
No. Do you think any regulation will come down the pipe that would require a CISO role? I hate regulation, but, and then there's been another comment from D-Man, which is what I was going to say. The SEC is going to start requiring CISOs and having them reporting to the board in public companies. So I think there's talk about that. I'm not sure how far down the line that is.
There you go. Ask and answer. So like I said at the beginning, I think the really big corporations, or the publicly listed corporations in the States, for example, they're starting to do it right. I don't know that they're necessarily got the approach right. They're still seeing it as, because I like that very proactive approach. I think a lot of them is more like setting up the security operations. But for me, as being like an altruistic leader, I guess, or contributor to the organization, like, I want to keep my costs as lean as possible for the org. And one of the things I noticed is that, and I remember seeing this one CISO's resume, and the very first thing on there was his ability to increase security budgets, to make the company spend more on security.
Wow.
That's apparently, like, a lot of people see that as valuable, and I'm kind of like, it's the opposite of what I want to do. Like, don't get me wrong, I've walked into plenty of organizations and they had no security.
Yeah.
And you need to build up a program. But those same organizations typically have low levels of visibility and maturity, and you can actually make the security functions almost self-funding. I've given some examples from my last employer. We found the operations team, we found them $50,000 a year in savings on Salesforce. We found $40,000 a year in marketing expenses that we were able to save. We were able to streamline loads of things. We were able to remove and consolidate several positions. We were able to save loads of licenses. We discovered tons and tons of excess AWS usage to the tune of hundreds of thousands a month, just from trying to get I want to have, in order to have security, I need to have visibility. So my phone's distracting me, just flipping it over. So just by trying to get that visibility, we discovered so much stuff in that business that yes, we had to spend more on security, but we actually, because of the security approach, we actually recovered all the funds and then some elsewhere in the business. So I think most companies are actually overspending on security, whereas everybody else is saying spend more and more and more.
I think if you look over the last 3 years, how much the increase in spend has gone up, but nothing seems to have improved. So it's clearly an issue, isn't it?
I think, did I do my NHS analogy at the last one? I can't remember.
I do like your NHS analogy, so it'd be good for you to do that again.
Yeah, so it'd be like if I, the security industry nowadays is like if I go to everyone and say, I'm going to increase all your taxes by 10% so I can double the NHS's funding to cut the, to address this issue with the waiting times. And then after 3 years and then doubling their budget, I get back to you and it's like, right, the waiting times have doubled again.
So this is where I reply and say, I know all about that because I'm 2 years waiting for a shoulder operation, isn't it?
There you go. But the solution, of course, is for me to tax you another 10% and double my spending again.
Absolutely.
And then 3 years later, actually, the waiting times have doubled again. We're going to need some more money from you. And only in security land does this seem to be, well, that and the NHS, does this seem to be acceptable. And you are essentially taxing the business. Security spending is going up and up. It's costing businesses more and more and more. But when I look at breaches, you've got companies who've spent millions in security, but then, well, why did you have all these admin accounts? Why hadn't you patched those systems? Why did you design this way? Why didn't you segregate that? Like stuff that costs nothing to do, or in fact, a lot of the stuff they had wasted money on. They spent a lot of money on stuff that was of no value, and then ignored a lot of really basics.
Well, maybe one of the comment again, Colleen, if I'm saying your name wrong, please do correct me. But thank you for your engagement. It's really, really useful. She says that she thinks the cyber insurance carriers say security spend needs to be 3% of your IT budget. Well, there lies half the problem if you're thinking you've got to spend your way out of it, perhaps.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, 3% is not that high, so that's conservative. So I think the average now is about 12% and going up. So 3% is about a quarter of that. So it's a low. I think you need to have some, but these things mean nothing. It's
got the name right.
Yeah, well done, sir. Because I've been dealing with some insurers lately, and it's really, really interesting. The problem is for example, you need to spend 3% of your IT budget on security. Okay, what's security? Are your routers security? Are your network devices security? Because, well, those Cisco routers, they do some security stuff, and they're $300,000 a pop. So it's very easy for me to come up with my 3% mark. Yeah. So it's very easy to just shift those monies. It's hard to regulate this stuff. But ultimately, I think it should be commercially driven and business value. So that's kind of the first part, where I'm probably a more commercially minded CISO than most. And there's a kind of a sales element as well. If I can, because there is now all this legislation, regulation around security, and people want to see ISO, they want to see this, or they have their own questionnaires and stuff. The faster you can answer those things, the more transparent you can be. And if you have good security, it's a lot easier to be transparent than if you have to make up all your audit responses and just fudge everything and find the one sample server that might actually be off the code. But everyone does it. Everyone does this.
Okay, well, look, we've identified the problem that no one knows what a CISO does, including half the CISOs out there as well. If you put your vendor hat on, or put my vendor hat on, how can they use that knowledge to improve the way they approach CISOs and they engage with people who basically buy their tools and products?
I think we've jumped the gun a little bit there, but yeah, I should move around to that. But some other things as a CISO, like just a commercial element. I can position security as a brand value. I can position security as a competitive differentiator against my competitors, increase our sales. I can expedite the legal process. I can make sure we capture contractual requirements with customers in our security so that we can reflect those and hype that up, because most contracts, they get signed and then no one ever looks at it again. If you make a point of every year reminding them, hey, you wanted us to do all these security things and look, we've done them, you can start differentiating yourself. from competitors long term as well. So there are commercial benefits that you can give to the business. And I think the more you are focused on cutting costs, on driving efficiencies, and the other thing about improving quality is, I give the example of saving money in certain places, but even just streamlining other business processes. We found, doing security reviews of, why are you using the tool this way? You could use it this way. Wouldn't that be better for you? And they're like, oh yeah, we never bothered looking into that. There's a lot of siloed thinking in various departments in business, not just IT.
Is there any responsibility there for the vendors who sell the tools on follow-ups to their clients? Or would you say the responsibility is on the client?
I think that's not too dissimilar to what we're trying to pitch to security vendors. I think those things could be applicable to vendors across the board. If you're Salesforce, get them to do it properly. In terms of how I then shape that work, and I think that's where the understanding from the vendors comes in. So I've got some issues with vendors is that one of the first thing I notice a lot is I go on a technology vendor's website, and it's got a lot of hyped up marketing words that the marketing department put there. And I'll read through about 10 pages, and I still don't actually know what the tool does. It's like, oh, it's hype, flash, cool graphics, great presentation. What does it do? I still, it's, threats are on the rise. They're everywhere. You need this, that. How does it achieve this? How does it, it must be written by marketing departments. I don't know. And I'm shooting myself in the foot now because I usually need marketing department approval to get my invoices paid. But, I'm here to help them, and I want them to communicate better so that when they do get interest, those leads are better and they're more qualified. And then their salespeople aren't always mad at them for giving them shitty leads. Instead, they're like, you gave us 50 leads, but they're all really, really good. So that's part of what I want to achieve. So that understanding of you need to communicate what it actually does. But also in terms of the value, it's not just because a lot of vendors have a technology and it does one thing and they just hype up that one thing, but how does that affect my business? Where's the actual value? Where's that going to fit in my program? Because ultimately, what I need to understand the different business processes, what the business is trying to achieve, what systems do that, what's their ideal state, what state should they be in, are they in that state, and is something changing? That's all I need to know. I need to know what it should look like, and is it looking like that now? If not, is it changing, and why? I can do that through any number of technological means.
And then you need a single pane of glass approach for that. Sorry.
I'm surprised you don't work for a vendor.
I thought about it, but I can't do it. No.
Yeah. It's hard, man.
It is.
So, sometimes I may be doing it one way, but there's nothing stopping me from doing it another way. So already just that understanding, it allows a vendor to potentially displace a competitor, understanding how things tie together and understanding how you can achieve. It's not like, oh, you need antivirus, you need XDR, you need MDR, you need this, you need backup, you need recovery. You don't need those technologies per se. It's understanding the end result that I'm trying to achieve with my program. I want this level of resilience. I want this level of visibility to these things.
So what you're saying is more open questions, more actual digging down and asking questions that are relevant, perhaps.
I think that would help. But right now, I think most don't even have a basic baseline of what most CISOs are trying to achieve in terms of getting that visibility and that control over their environments. And that's pretty much what I want out of my program. I want to define every business process, both from a kind of business and how the technology that supports it is maintained. To have visibility to it, define what it should look like, and have control over it. And then if it does somehow deviate for whatever reason, which it shouldn't once I have control over it, but whatever, then I want to detect it. So once you understand that, then you start being able to understand how your product could sit in what the CISO is trying to achieve. And you can even argue with the CISO. The CISO say, oh, I'm already doing this with this other thing. Then you can go, yeah, but you could do that. But by using our thing, you could displace this thing and you can improve that thing. So the kind of tool positioning there is important.
Does that mean they need to understand their competitors more?
Yeah, I think basic technologies. And this is, like what I've started doing now is I help them with that. I create the narrative and I explain the different technologies and how things tie together, and we illustrate that in kind of a nice framework. The other thing, and this we touched on last time, is there's just no thought of strategic value. Um, it's Most of the technologies out there are just trying to solve symptoms, and very few people are pushing the narrative of, my vulnerability scanner. It doesn't just show you the vulnerabilities you have now, but it gives you an insight as to what types of issues you have, and then you can go and trace those issues and address the business process. Those are the things I'm interested in. I'm interested in finding out, why are people making mistakes?
Why do these issues keep coming up?
Yeah. Why do I have unpatched systems? Why are users, are they, whether it's phishing emails or just making errors in data entry, or why am I having to clean stuff up? Why do I have, we have an IAM process. Why do I have these rogue accounts anyway? Where's this stuff coming from? So to understand the bigger problems and how an end solution that may not say that on the tin, but can be used to achieve those things. And I think there's very few CISOs out there who actually build out programs. They actually have business understanding. Why are you not able to restore is a really good one. I've seen that one loads of time. And that's, you have asset management processes, you have patching processes, you have architectural standards, you have backup processes. But then you look at them and it's like, well, I'm missing assets. I've got misconfigured assets. I've got unpatched assets. My backups don't have what I expect on them. So there's a lot of process issues. That's my main concern as a strategic CISO. I want to fix these things so that they stop. I can address the issues of why my backups don't work, for example, and then I can move on to, why aren't my patches deployed? To why don't the products that the engineering team is putting out meet our architectural standards? And I can make systematic progress, because once I've addressed them, they hopefully stay pretty fixed. I spoke to Ido Ganor yesterday, who's got that CISOteria product.
Great guy.
Very interesting, actually.
Yeah.
Because the whole idea is the processes are where the problems are coming from. It's not the technology, it's the processes. And you put your processes in them, and then whenever you fancy, have a separate entity, party, person audit them every month, 3 months, whatever, and flag how many deviations. And then that gives you a health status of all your different processes. Because everyone just creates policies and processes and assume they work. And this actually gives you like a health score of how effective they all are. And then you can improve them until you actually trust those processes, and then you can park them and work on other stuff. I thought that's a really, really cool way of helping CISOs in their approach on doing this.
I think I've seen a couple of demos. I've actually got another demo tomorrow because I'm intrigued by the platform, but it seems to give the structure that many people are missing.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things where I feel like vendors could really, really help, because a lot of CISOs in place now, I don't know how to word this delicately, but aren't truly CISOs, come from a tech background, and don't have that experience in building up and managing programs or a strategy, and then building a program to deliver on that strategy. And I think vendors could really help. It may not benefit them specifically for their product, but just by helping educate them, it gives value, and it creates a place where their product then fits. And it's a great way of upselling, because this is how it should be shaped. You should be looking at these capabilities for your various processes, and this piece can address this, and then the next piece would be that. And once you have those two, well, if you get this one, you get the synergetic relationship between them. So it makes sense to, and basically upsell a portfolio of services that work well together, as opposed to just flogging the latest piece of tech.
Does that lead into? I'm going to annoy every vendor watching this now, but does it lead into working with a trusted advisor, someone who's got access to a panel of different tools and services?
I feel like the vendor should be a trusted advisor to some degree. I think we need to like move away a bit from the flogging and fear mongering.
Yeah.
If every tech vendor's claim that whatever we are fighting causes
99% of
X% of, well, their thing is 97% of breaches, and their thing is 98% of breaches, and their thing is 94% of breaches. So
who covers the two?
Yeah, well, apparently it's, if you ask vendors, like 5 solution vendors cover 700% of the root causes of breaches. So
yeah,
it's I think we need to move away from that and be a bit more honest about what our services do.
So you think the narrative needs to change from vendors rather than the statistics and scare tactics?
Yeah, because it's funny because they're doing that and everyone's fed up with it. No one believes numbers that vendors spit out. They don't even claim where they come from, and then they're just like, how, what? MFA would prevent 99.99% of breaches, and that's probably one of the ones that's closer to the truth, but it's still not 99.99%. Or I think we need to move away from that. And the irony is that they're losing the confidence of the end customer and of the CISO by making these claims that this one little technical issue is 2/3 or 90% of your issues to sell a point solution.
Yeah.
When in reality, their point solution probably has some really good strategic uses. It can probably, it may just solve that one problem, but it gives visibility to other things. It gives you strings that you can pull on. A simple vulnerability management tool doesn't just tell me what vulnerabilities I have, but it gives me insights as to what my network looks like. It shows me that I've got weird assets, or it shows me that I've got AWS scaling issues because I'm seeing loads of duplicates of assets, and it tells me because I'm seeing the same vulnerability repeated, and I'm noticing that my host naming nomenclature is all totally random and not coordinated. These are all problems that I can then go and solve and have a really, really big impact. So instead of amping up the one problem that you officially address, give some thought to the other problems that your tool, you maybe didn't design it for that, but it can help, can help a CISO achieve all these other things. Market that instead, because that's way more helpful.
More of a stained Gaast than single pane of glass.
Whatever you want to call it. But it's I think it's a lot more genuine. It's more help, and it's more honest because you can actually do these things instead of fudging the numbers of how important the one thing, that one thing you claim to be solving is. So this problem will make 99% of things go away if you fix it with our tools. It just won't. No. Whereas if you use this tool, you will fix this. You may fix this one problem, which is 2-3% of your total problem space, but it will give you feelers and insights as to another 30 or 40% of your problem space, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
So sell it that way. So that's a lot more helpful to me. Yeah. So I think that's where we can start building out that trusted relationship, and especially for like big vendors, distributors. Been talking to Moston from PAX 8.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Really, really enjoyed that. I'm really excited about that because they have a whole portfolio. So we could actually, maybe create like a program where CISOs, or we need to talk about not just CISOs, but where you can basically guide them about like, okay, what is your organization like? Maybe not your specific organization, but create a program for MSPs, for example, which is their customer base. So how could you structure an IT program or a security program to do delivery and engineering in an MSP type environment? What do we think are the best practices with the best tools that we have in our portfolio? And how can you use them? What are the synergies? What's, kind of long-term strategic things can you do with them that are maybe not on the tin? And lay that out for them. And, start one step at a time, 2 steps at a time, start seeing the value, start seeing the synergies. And then you have that trusted relationship. You educated them on them. You showed them how to do this. You showed them the way forward. And as long as you don't breach that trusted relationship, they're going to keep going forward with you. So I think for that kind of vendor, like a PAX 8, that could be really, really nice. You're basically just hand-holding. And as long as you maintain that trusted relationship, which you build up by giving the vendor insight, the customer, the CISO insights, then you're there. Because I think we've got kind of a spectrum of CISOs of those who really, really know what they're doing and are just really pissed off by people peddling them bullshit and just want a straight and honest supplier. And you have a lot that kind of come from that technical background who maybe don't really understand business, don't understand program management, don't understand strategy, aren't really sure what they're doing, really reliant on reading what Forrester and Gardner says. And already, if you're having to do that, you're not really thinking for yourself. So even if you have the components, you're probably not able to tie them together properly. Those people need help.
And this is where the vendors can come in as trusted advisors, isn't it? Especially for the newer CISOs who haven't got those established relationships.
Yeah, and you need to do that shift of just not trying. Oh, they're ignorant. Let's peddle them everything we can. Sell them. Build a trusted relationship, and sell from that. And I think that will guarantee you a lot more return business. And again, if you have a portfolio of services, you're either a vendor with a portfolio of products and services, or you're someone like Pax8 where you've got, I think they've got somewhere like 25 to like 45 different products, depending on the country you're operating in. They can probably meet 80% of what you need, all with that one trusted vendor. And if you bought the first 3 products from them and you had this guidance and synergy and trusted relationship and all this advice, well, why wouldn't you buy the next 10 from them?
Okay, honest question, and a question I'm interested in. Do you think consolidation and acquisition could help in this space?
Define consolidate of vendors, you mean?
Yeah. It's only because of what you said about, if Pax8 do 80% of what you do, why use 15 different vendors and try and mash things together?
So Pax8's an interesting one because Pax8, as far as I know, it's not their own products that they sell. They sell products from other companies. So I could kind of see, I think if you have consolidation at the actual vendor level, it's probably going to cause some issues with innovation and competitiveness. So I would let the individual vendors do their own thing and innovate.
Yeah.
But then I think
you're going to lose that part.
If you are a Pax8 who can then pick and choose both what are the best point solutions, but also what works best together in your portfolio, then I think that's a really strong position to be in. And obviously that adds an intermediary, but I think there's probably economies of scale by doing it through them. And I think the guidance would also be invaluable.
It's you mentioned Pax8. I think I mentioned this company to you a few weeks ago. Stefan Semmelroth, based in the States, is there. I think he's their strategic director for security. It's Avant Communications.
Yes.
And they do something very similar. They've got a huge suite of products that they constantly market research. And then they'll go in and look at not just the security, but the whole IT infrastructure, everything. And going back to something you said earlier in this chat, they end up making cost savings in other parts of the business to enable the spend on security, which I thought was quite powerful and relates to what you were saying earlier as well.
Yeah. For me, it's, I've started to look at security as, you get breached because you have defects. If you have incorrectly configured tools, systems, badly architectured systems, accounts, the wrong privileges on accounts, missing patches, misconfigurations, these are all quality defects. They should never have been there. You should have had a process that guided how the system was built. And when it was designed,
and you wouldn't need a tool. Yeah.
When it was designed, it should have had the allowances to, well, this is going to need to be patched, potentially on a 48-hour notice. So how are we going to do that when the system is live in production? That should have all been thought of. So it's every time you can't do that, or you supposedly can do that and have a process, but it's not happening, regardless of the level at which it's happening, you have some kind of quality defect. But not every security vulnerability is a quality defect, you could argue, but not every defect is a security vulnerability. You have other types of defects. It could just be poor performance. It could be you're using 3 times more AWS resource than you should be. One of the things I like to point out, just as it's an extreme example, but everyone loves to use Python. Developers love to use Python because it's quick to develop, but computationally, it's 76 times slower than C, which means technically, if you're doing very compute-intensive stuff or memory-intensive stuff, your AWS bill could be 76 times higher. Go tell that to a finance director and tell me he's not curious.
He will be.
So, that's an extreme example, but you could, a factor of 2, 3, 4, 5, even 10 is not unreasonable. And that's the thing when earlier I was saying maybe we need to move beyond CISOs, because I think, vendors are approaching CISOs, but a lot of them don't have the business involvement. They don't have the business savvy. And there's a lot of, once you start, no one's making these kind of quality cost saving arguments around security tooling, right? It's the threat and the scary hackers and the green matrix stuff and the black hoodies and that kind of stuff. That's not going to sway a finance director, like if you can't show them bottom line, whatever. But if you start talking about streamlining processes, and we're talking about, and somebody mentioned it, like quality management, Six Sigma, that kind of stuff, that they understand.
Yeah.
And if you start talking to an FD about that kind of stuff and optimizing, or a COO, and just systematically going through the organization, and it's like, look, if we're spending $100 million a year, 50, 1,000, say 10,000 people, I can either shave 10% off my IT operations, or I need to fire 500 people. Which one would you rather do? And you see these big tech layoffs this last year.
Yeah.
But the fact is, I highly doubt that most of those people that got laid off ever were really considerate about the cost of what they were doing was on the business, in terms of IT resource, running costs, cloud hosting costs, that kind of stuff. And the problem is when they're looking, like the finance director isn't going to understand what the cost in your AWS usage is and what potential savings there is there. But he or she is going to understand
what that means.
These people cost $100,000 a year each. I've got 100 of them. If I cut to 50%, I save X.
Yeah.
So what's he or she going to do? He's going to do the action that they understand. So driving this kind of visibility and having these conversations is really interesting and really enlightening to them. And these are the type of things that you can get this type of visibility to business spend, albeit somewhat indirectly, but it is that where you find a thread to pull on through security tooling, because a lot of security tooling is actually about visibility, right?
Yeah. You
can have some really interesting discussions with a finance director. Why even talk to the CISO? Talk to the finance director. So it opens up the audience a bit to for vendors and service providers, I think, because also a lot of, we mentioned this before, like a lot of CIOs, I think, are a bit more business focused, but a lot of security people are very threatened.
Yeah.
I've worked in countless organizations where I report up to a CISO, up until maybe 5 years ago, and I'm pointing out things that aren't right, or I'm pointing out we could be doing this way better. Like, why is it so cumbersome? Why does it take 6 months to patch one server?
I bet that wasn't encouraged.
And yeah, it's very, they don't want to hear it. Keep your head down. And you get P45 that's fired.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of that, unfortunately. And I know it was actually, who was the chap? It was the guy who offered to come on. I've forgotten his name now.
Steve Armstrong.
No, not Steve.
Come on here.
Yeah, I sent you a message on LinkedIn about him, I think.
Yes, I can't remember who it was, though.
So sorry, I've totally forgotten your name. But let's see if I can get his name. And he even did a post after our last one of these. Come on.
See who finds it first.
Yeah.
It's not a competition, Greg.
Hold on.
It wasn't David Higgs from Rapid 7, was it?
There you go. So David was actually talking, like, he runs into these issues because he goes and pushes his product to companies, and it highlights just how much their security organizations actually missed.
Yeah.
And then they want him out of there.
Yeah. It's just pissing people off.
Yeah. And I've experienced that similar thing. So very often even though the CISO is probably your biggest customer in terms of buying, or CISO equivalent, there's probably 10, 20, 30% of the market where they're the first people they're going to shoo you away. because they don't want you to highlight the problems.
So again, the issue with the marketing material that's out there from the vendors aimed at non-technical people, aimed at the C-suite, is it's, as you've said already, all scare tactics and matrix grids.
Yeah, and a lot of them don't want that,
No.
And whereas if instead you have a more positive kind of, we can streamline the business process, we can reduce your costs. Just doing better security already. I'm sorry, but we could probably destaff most SOCs by 50% fairly easily if we just had some, that 10% focus on improving business and IT process. So now you can have these conversations with an FD or a COO, and if you build narratives and anecdotes and models to show like this is how we can generate this value in a language that to them, just address that different audience in the way that audience needs to be addressed. You've just potentially doubled your audience, and if your product really can deliver value, then why not? So it's a more receptive audience.
How do you get round the, or can you get round the CISOs who block those kind of conversations?
Don't go to them. Go to the FD. Go to the COO.
Simple answer, isn't it?
How many CISOs do we hear complaining about, they report to the CIO and he blocks me or he or she blocks me? It's like, yeah, but you guys do the same thing all the time.
Yeah. It's different then.
Exactly. So, it's uncomfortable. It's the reality of the industry. Should we try and address some questions? Do we have?
We've got a couple in here. Let's bring up Richard's first. I think we've already talked about it a little bit. Is it worth asking the CISO what they're trying to protect rather than them just answering the business, digging down into a more in-depth conversation? And how would you do that, I suppose, Greg, politely?
I think the business is a good example, but what do you know about the business?
Yeah.
Yeah, like what is the business? Where is the Richard Dyson made a great point. He was like, well, what's your risk tolerance? And risk tolerance is so-and-so. And he's like, really? Because that's 6 times your bank balance. You can't. you have no idea what your risk tolerance is.
Again, the terminology for me is different. Working in finance for 20 years, that would be capacity for loss. That conversation. What is your capacity for loss? Because I think it's something that people don't talk about enough. Stephen's come up with a good one. Let's bring that one up. What part of the industry should CISOs really pay attention to within their teams? I notice a lot of them are worried about losing their jobs after a breach, not familiar with corporate security side.
I don't know what you mean by which part of the industry.
Which part of the business does he mean?
Maybe.
Yeah, let's go with business.
I think the very first thing I should be doing as a CISO is understanding the business, building relationships. Ideally, I want to be at or close to, I should have had a conversation with the CEO by the time I've started. And I should be presenting him with a state of, here's where things are at. Here's my plan to fix it. It's going to take about 3 years. It's not going to be pretty. Well, my general strategy most of the time is, go in, get a feel for the place, concoct the strategy around how I'm going to fix this in terms of improving the quality of processes so that we have less crap to deal with operationally. But a program, startup, you're looking at 2-3 years, big organization, 3 to 5 years. So the very next thing is, because this can be done on a shorter term, how fast and how good can I get my recovery to be? Because that's the bit that's going to be saving my ass while my program is building out. Like, I may not have covered everything. It's going to take me another 2 years to get the processes to where they're fairly high quality, where the risk of a breach is very low. But at least in the interim, if I do get breached, I have the ability to recover very quickly. So that's my usual kind of strategy. But you definitely want to be clear in your communication and just kind of
managing expectations, I suppose, is a huge part of that.
Yeah. Just have a conversation with people.
Although, as Andrew says, C-suite in the US can't think past a fiscal quarter. That's a fair point.
Well, break it down in quarters.
Yeah.
Recovery is probably something that can be done in like a small org, 1 quarter, even a very large org, 6 to 9 months, like very large, like 20,000 plus employee, probably do that in 6 to 9 months.
Still, it's not bad. I mean, again, it's getting the buy-in from the C-suite, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's getting the buy-in for, okay, here's the initiative, and that part of that buy-in, the charter to that, is the understanding that each department is ultimately responsible, because creating, the backup and recovery, for example, kind of strategy and infrastructure and mechanisms isn't that hard. The hard part is getting all the individual teams and groups to actually tap into it to make sure you've captured them. That is ultimately up to them.
Absolutely. I think we've got about 2 minutes left. Anything you want to finish off on before we wrap things up?
No. So I'm hoping that gives a little bit more of an insight for CISO. I mean, you're always running a program. There's a lot of different ways of skinning a cat. The more you understand, the more you can create strategic narratives around your product, but also potentially displace others. And I think when it comes to execs and HR and the people hiring CISOs, they should be expecting a bit more than what we're getting today.
I'd go along with that, and also don't act like the NHS. I think was another valuable learning point out of the conversation.
Yeah, we need more altruism. We should be proud to be able to. I get excited if I manage to cut 20% cost here, 30% cost there. I see that as a win. That's something I get reward from, as opposed to, I've got an extra 30,000 spend here, or an extra tool there, or I've got 2 more headcount. It's just not what does it for me.
I completely agree, and I really appreciate your time, Greg. I think it's been, as usual, very insightful having you on the show, and hopefully we can come back again in 2 weeks' time and dig a bit deeper into this topic if you're available. I see you're checking your phone already.
I know. I'm going to see what our next topic was.
What is our next topic, Greg?
Hold on.
While Greg's doing that, quick sales pitch from my end. I'm over in the US, March the 30th, Tampa Bay. We've got a CISO Experience Invitational event at Eastlake Woodlands Golf Club, sponsored by 360 Advanced and Ballast Services, where we're going to be holding a live panel debate with Steve Hindle, the CISO for Mad Mobile, and a couple of other industry-leading guests on the National Cybersecurity Strategy and, Colleen, as you mentioned earlier, the SEC guidelines or proposed SE guidelines. So if you're interested in attending, it's a free event with free food and alcohol. So if you'd like to come and you're an industry leader in Tampa, please do drop me a line. And I'm sure Greg has already found out what our next topic is in 2 weeks' time.
I mean, really, I want to know if Splooge Burden is actually a name, because
his name's Richard. There's a story behind the splodge. I'll tell you offline. Yeah.
Cool. So the next 2 weeks, we're going to cover vendor communication. So a bit about your product doesn't explain WTF. Your site doesn't explain what the WTF your product does. And just creating kind of narratives about value propositions around products, as opposed to just focusing on the techie bit that it does. So make it more business relevant, and make the CISO understand how it's actually going to make their life better, as opposed to just what it does. Then we're going to talk about opening up the audience. So more business focus, more focus on financial value proposition. So you open that up to CFO, financial director, exec, even board. In this case, we can get pretty deep into this, down to like financial modeling of stuff. I'd love to go into like framework, how things fit together, how you can, as a vendor, this can be very interesting because your product, so William Taft, for example, they have this great video, blockchain enabled video conferencing system that they like struggling to sell it because we already use Team to use this with that. Okay, but this is different. I was like, well, sell it as a tool, as like for a specific project. So it's not like your video conferencing tool. It's this project is special, so it needs this thing.
Yeah, well, it could be if you're talking about the legal profession, it could be for interviews, couldn't it? It could be for client communication, client interviews.
Yeah, exactly. So you can have by associating specific applications with a tool, you give it a business case.
Selling the story, not the sizzle.
Yeah. But also how things can displace each other. So you may have a solution, they already have something, but you may be able to displace it, but not by knocking out the directly competing solution, but by shifting things in such a way that something elsewhere frees up some money that can then pay for your solution. It sounds weird, but psychologically, it's a lot
easier.
If you're displacing something directly, it's kind of like, why am I going to go through the trouble? Whereas if you're displacing something that's a bit more back of line, back of mind, there's less of a reluctance to losing that.
Yeah, less barriers.
It's hard to use that, not getting a lot of value out of that, and then I can reinvest this and get more value that way. Yes, I can do that. The general idea of like using tools to improve quality, so going from tech back to improving process and even potentially culture, people, business. We're going to talk about forming trusted relationships and how you can do that. And then love to get some sponsors and go tool by tool and discuss every kind of tool or every specific tool and just all the different, not written on the tin kind of strategic stuff that you could potentially do with them that very often the vendor themselves haven't thought of.
In that case, then, big call out to the vendors. If you're interested in getting involved in the future events and perhaps sponsoring a couple of these shows and getting your product out there and analysed by Mr. Greg van der Gaast, please do reach out either to myself or to Greg. I think we're about a wrap now. We've gone over time a little bit, Greg. I know you've got things to do. I've got to go and pick up my... Well, no, I'm lying. I've got to go and pick up my 17-year-old son who's failed his driving test today. So that's going to be a sad one. But everyone, thank you very, very much for tuning in. Greg, thank you so much for your time. Catch you all again soon.
See you in 2 weeks.
See you later.
Bye all.